we're going to move to some more calls, and I want to go to AJ in Texas. Does biology make the case for moral consideration of non-human animals? Interesting. I would like to take AJ's call. You are on with Jimmy, Dan, and Forrest. How are you?
Hey guys, how you doing? I'm doing great. Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
Hey, AJ, did you know that while we were goofing around talking about fictional characters, an anonymous donor donated $25, and then Sean Isherwood donated £5, and then David Haxor donated $5 colorful Canadian dollars, and that brings us up to $30,221 raised for Doctors Without Borders? I knew that. Did you know that?
I did not know that, but that is fucking awesome.
You know it
pretty
now.
cool, dude.
Yeah.
Nice.
But thank you. Yeah, your fundraiser is amazing. I've been following it, and I'm super proud of the work you're doing for Doctors Without Borders.
Thank you. Thank you so
Exciting.
much.
Thank you.
So what's up, AJ?
So here's the thing. I promised Dan on the Truth Wanted after show on Friday that I will put him and Forrest kind of on the spot today. And I was comment on that call that you guys had, with Chase, who called about veganism. I understood his frustration about the issue with the age of the animals that we used to eat, but I thought that wasn't really the best method to determine the whole morality of eating animals, the argument, right? And I thought that there were a few points that weren't brought up, and I would love to discuss it, especially with Forrest.
Okay, so let's save best for last on this, and let me go first because I want to talk about this. So Chase has had an impact on me. So I did Meet the ACA on September 10th. Okay, that was a Tuesday, and Chase came on, and we were talking about like my life story, if you will, or my transition from being a believer into being an atheist. And I can harken back to when I was like 9 years old, hearing the story of Jesus taking demons out of a man or two men, depending on what story you read, and putting those demons into a herd of pigs and then killing the pigs. And I guess in effect, slaughtering or dispelling the demons, right? And I thought to myself, why did he have to kill the pigs to do that? So Chase popped up and said, Jimmy, why do you have a problem with Jesus killing the pigs, but you don't have a problem eating pigs, particularly in the circumstances of Hawaiian pizza, where pineapple and ham go on pizza together, which is a different conversation. So Chase challenged me to do at least 22 days of vegan diet. And I'm on day 25. So I took Chase up. And the reason why I chose to do that is because he actually makes a really good point. Like the suffering is the part that really gets me, right? The way that animals are treated is a conundrum that I am in as somebody who is traditionally a meat eater. The why, like I can understand, I suppose, eating animals, right? And people say, well, if aliens or whatever came to Earth and tried to eat humans, would that be moral? And my thought is, well, I don't know if it would be moral, but isn't that already happening? Aren't things generally trying to eat us? Like, aren't humans food in some things' eyes? I think so. And I think that sometimes humans get eaten, and it's not right or wrong. It's just life. But we do treat animals horribly. And even if we're going to kill them, do we need to treat them the way that we do? And that is where I have a lot of trouble, regardless of the age of the animal, I don't know, kind of coming up with a justification. So right now I'm kind of in this phase where I'm analyzing, my beliefs on that, and I'm kind of trying to work my way around it. And for the time being, I'm taking Chase up on his challenge and going as far as I can. But I do think that animals deserve humane treatment, if that makes sense. And that's a problem for me. So, all right. Thank you for letting me get on that spiel. I'm going to kick it over. You said you wanted to talk to Forrest. I'm going to give it to Forrest first, because I know Dan is going to bust at the seams with all the things that Forrest is going to say as the resident vegan.
Yeah, let me tell you why Dan is wrong. So the thing that I think is really I think that it's as I said on to Truth Wanted, I think that it is unarguable that the meat industry sucks, that the way that we treat animals sucks, that we need to be eating less meat overall for climate reasons. I think those are unarguable points. It is very obvious that even if you don't want to grant, human level sentience to different animals, cows and pigs certainly know like what's going on, and having raised some of them myself, I can tell you, like, yeah, they're intelligent creatures that have emotions and have, desires and feelings and things. So like, I think the way that they are treated in like factory farms and the inhumane way in which they are often slaughtered and processed is completely unacceptable and needs to be fixed immediately. And also, it is a major climate issue because that much biomass, that much the gas production, the waste production, the hormones used, the antibiotics used, all these things that are used in order to try to skirt around ethical treatment and ethical land management has dire ramifications, not only for those animals, but also for the climate, for the land that those animals are living on, for the populations that those animals are feeding. Occasionally, it's an all around shit deal that needs to be reformed like dramatically. That being said, I can also understand that veganism might not be a viable option for everybody for either economic reasons, which I think we made the point earlier on the last show that like as more vegan options become more available and more proliferated throughout the economy, they'll become cheaper and more affordable. That's great. I think eating bugs is really cool, and we should be looking into more insect proteins as another source to supplant a lot of a lot of mammal-based proteins. Like pork and beef, and even chicken is an avian protein. I think that insect protein could be a major factor in replacing that is cheaper and more sustainable to produce and doesn't have nearly the same issue of like sentient suffering creatures. That's a big thing. I also understand that when we do talk about totally plant-based diets and economies, soy and avocados and oh gosh, what else? There's a lot of crops that are not super sustainable that take like a huge amount of resources to grow. That kind of sucks. So like the almonds, Jesus, so like there's nothing to be said for the fact that there are still resources being used here. And if you have hundreds of millions of acres of land dedicated to growing soy in order to make enough tofu to feed everybody, that's still not great from like a climate and sustainability perspective. Also, a lot of the times, this is still, because we still live in a capitalist hellscape, this is still going to rely on the exploitation of humans. Usually probably in the global south, who are going to be growing these crops to then be shipped up north on big container ships, which is bigger problems not only for human rights, but also still for climate issues. So like, I don't think it's reason, and I could go on and on about like little nitpicky things. I talked on Friday about how like wheat, soy, and peanuts are very common vegan alternatives and are also very common food allergies. And so that's kind of problematic for people. But like, I go on and on with little nitpicky things. I just think it's important to say that like, I think veganism is fine, I don't have an issue with it. I don't think it is the moral end game that it is often framed as. I think there's a lot of issues that surround the way that we produce any kind of food in the world that we live in today. And that's what really needs to be addressed. And that would ameliorate so many of the problems that veganism tries to assess, as well as many other problems as well. That's my soapbox.
AJ, comments on that?
Okay, so firstly, I do have lots of comments. Okay, firstly, I don't want to ignore Jimmy's opening statement, so I'm going to address that first. That was you on the comment section on that day when I was watching the show live, and I thought that was amazing that you started the diet based on on Chase's challenge to you. I think that's great, and I think that's probably a similar story to what Dan has. For me, it wasn't an atheist sort of experience. For me, it was more health related. First came trying to change my diet for health, and then sort of learning about all the different aspects of animal welfare that came with veganism, with listening to vegan creators on YouTube and all of that. So yeah, Jimmy, stick with it. I'll reach out to you, later. And Forrest, I completely agree with all your assessments about regarding the climate issues that both veganism would create, like producing vegan proteins, right? And not just for the environment, but sociological and financial issues that brings. And while I do agree with that, what I think I had some more specific arguments that I hadn't. Obviously, I'm sure they have been brought up before, but everybody knows that Forrest, you're one of my favorite hosts. Like I look up to you, and I respect your knowledge and your perspective. So
I can't wait to disappoint you.
When you were on that call with Chase, yeah, great. No, what I mean is that I'm not like coming from like trying to fight you, but
sure.
I would like to challenge you. So,
okay, yeah.
So
I love being challenged. Please do.
There's an aspect. Oh, cool. Yeah, like there's like an additional argument that we could make, and I think it will resonate a little bit better with you being a biologist. So,
sure.
On the call with Chase, I understood your argument that meat can be part of a healthy diet. But I wanted to dig deeper on your statement on that call, when you say that humans have evolved to adapt to eating meat and that we get a significant benefit from it. And I think that, aside from, as you pointed out, that the food allergies and the accessibility in areas like food deserts or with severe poverty, it's just to say that the majority of people do have access to what would be considered an affordable and nutritionally dense plant-based diet. Not even vegan, not like a full vegan, just plant-based, right? Because there's like a nuance, there's a difference there. So my first question to you will be like kind of like a pushback. What exactly did you mean when you say that we evolved to adapt to eating meat? And what is this significant benefit that we get from it that we cannot get from a plant protein as far as quality?
Yeah. So what I mean by the evolution thing is that like the actual, like the evolutionary story of humans, meat eating plays a lot into that. Meat eating is a hominin specific adaptation that like plays a lot into our evolutionary history, plays a lot into the evolution of stone tools, plays a lot into the evolution of technology in general. The development of fire was mainly for, well, I shouldn't say mainly, it was largely for cooking. We have evidence of cooking going back, damn near a million years. And so like we were able to use the meat that we found. We were scavengers for a while. And then we actually started being able to hunt a little bit more efficiently and process meat more efficiently and cook that meat more efficiently, which made the meat more nutritionally beneficial to us and easier to chew and digest as well. And all of this played into specifically brain evolution. So we are the way we are largely because of our meat-based diet over the past 2 million years, mainly. But you can go back further than that, closer to 3 to 4 million years. But like that's a big part of it. And what I think is really important to say there is that like you can't derive an ought from an is. So like I can't say that like, yeah, humans evolved eating meat. It's a big part of our evolutionary history. Therefore, we should keep doing it. That doesn't make any sense. However, there are certain benefits that we do get from it. I can't remember the name of the amino acid. I think it's tyrosine that we can't biosynthesize, that we have to get from the external environment. And so like Dan was even talking on the last thing that like supplements are important when you're doing these things. There's certain things that you need that you would get from a more, I don't want to say well-balanced because that would sound biased, a more diverse diet than a plant-based diet alone can offer. That said, you are right to say that there are plenty of people that enjoy a totally normal life with a vegetarian diet. Look at the vast majority, like the population of India, where you have like a huge population of Hindu people that are culturally vegetarian and are doing just fine in terms of like, they're not needing some sort of meat supplement. But that isn't, vegetarian is not veganism. And so like you can still have milk in there. You can still have butter in there. You can still have cheese in there. There are still ways you can get some animal protein. So that's my whole spiel about it. It's a part of our history. It's still useful today. I think that it needs to be tempered quite a bit better than it is. I don't think it's any secret at this point in the medical community that like eating less meat's generally a good thing to do. And Americans specifically, it's kind of weird how we in America specifically, but really just in the global West, like tend to, or I should say global Northwest, tend to want some sort of meat with every single meal all the time. That's certainly not, normal. So it needs to be tempered quite a bit. But to say that it is either uniformly bad or like easy to exclude, I think is a pretty big stretch.
Yeah, AJ, if you have some responses to Forrest, that's great. Otherwise, I want to bring Dan in as well as the resident vegan. So do you have anything before we switch over to Dan?
Oh, I would love to hear from Dan as well.
Okay.
Yeah. So when we talk about veganism, I just want to make sure that we understand that veganism is the eschewing of animal products. So it's not just the dietary stuff, right? It is the eschewing of animal products in general. And I think that's an important distinction to make, just because the case that I make for veganism is a moral case. It is not just a case that obviously biology plays a huge part in it. But more importantly, it plays a part because of the philosophical values that veganism brings. And I want to bring this, I think I can make my point with this very concise. So I talk about this concept that Peter Singer introduces called the circle of moral consideration, right? And so when we think about rocks, nobody is going to complain about me kicking a rock all day, because a rock doesn't really have interests, right? Maybe there's some indigenous tribe somewhere that believe that there's spirits within all objects, but we would summarily dismiss that, right? Because we don't really have a lot of good evidence for that. So, that's not something that we would care about. Bringing that further, let's talk about dogs. Right now, dogs, if I post a picture or a video of me kicking a dog on Facebook or something, right, most people are going to be shocked, and I would say justifiably so. But that's kind of a new thing. Rene Descartes, the guy that says, "I think, therefore as I am," he was at the time they called themselves natural philosophers, but he was a scientist in many ways, and he would do live vivisections on dogs. They would put dogs on boards and pin them so that they could see their circulation, running through all their systems. And I know Forrest knows this because he studies this in school. And this wasn't just for Rene Descartes. This was quite a common practice.
It was horrific.
This is shocking to us, but at the time, their idea was, well, dogs are basically automatons, right? They don't have souls, so they don't really have the same level of moral equivalence or value. But the truth is, and I know Forrest knows this as well, is that the same sort of systems that are used, the nervous system and the limbic systems, are so similar to that because they are mammals, extremely similar to that in human beings. So there's no reason for me to think otherwise, that a dog is, obviously I don't know the subjective experience of a dog, right? This is Thomas Nagel, right? I don't know what it's like to be a bat, but I can make pretty reasonable assumptions that dogs can experience a similar subjective sensation when it comes to pain, right? But when we talk about pigs and cows, wait a minute, they use those same systems, right? There's really no reason for me to think differently. We kind of have some cultural biases because we think of pigs and cows as sort of animals that are just meant for food. In fact, we breed them as such. In the same way that we have so many different dog species, we have species of cows and species of pigs that directly benefit us as humans for products of consumption, when the reality is they actually still have those same systems, those same life-preserving instincts and interests of their own that aren't dissimilar to dogs or cats or any of these other animals that we would be mortified in harming. But yet we continue to justify these farm-bred, the harm of these farm-bred animals, because we say, well, this is for our consumption. My conclusion is that this is a blind spot in our reasoning. I think that we can move beyond this. Chase was calling in on Friday because he was celebrating 15 years of not eating animals, right? And the truth is, there are for thousands of years, there have been cultures that have been able to do this. This isn't exactly a brand new thing. It's just something, particularly in the West, where we don't really have that same sense of issues. Like, God has kind of given us dominion over animals, right? Historically in the Christian canon. So like we've always kind of viewed ourselves as above. But I think the view of biology actually helps inform us, if anything, that we are way more close closer to animals than we might think, including with our systems of feeling pain, right? That's kind of my case for why I think it is actually a justifiable position to take, that it is sort of the moral end game, if you will, as Forrest put it, to adopt a vegan perspective. So hopefully that was succinct enough.
No, I think that was great. In the meantime, in the interim, I'm not trying to pull the bullshit of like, we can't do solar farms because the blades aren't recyclable. You know what I mean? I'm just curious, like if we're replacing a lot of animal products, leather, gelatin, porcine and bovine heart valves that we use for transplant patients. Like there's the mice and rats that we use to study, disease and to like make it like, if we're getting rid of all of these things, what are we filling these gaps with? And from a materials perspective, that would be a lot more plastics, a lot more textiles, which are damaging to the environment and to the communities that they're produced in. The biomedical side, we're losing a tremendous amount of technology and innovation that would save thousands, millions of lives if we, so like where's the line there in terms of like service animals? I mean, flip dude, where's the line here in terms of like using animals to benefit humans, where we're saying we can no longer do that?
I'm not against people using service animals. I don't think there's a service animal unless you're deliberately mistreating service animals in some sort of way. I don't know.
I don't just mean, I'm sorry, I don't mean to cut you off. I don't just mean service animals for like, blind people, for example, or for like anxiety or whatever. Like I'm saying, like when we use animals as like tools, like when we use them for hunting, when we use them for bomb sniffing, when we use them for drug sniffing, like that is putting those animals in harm's way. To
be clear, the vegan perspective would be there would be no hunting. Right. So that's one thing. But yeah. So, I mean, Peter Singer, I think, also talks about this in his book, Animal Liberation. He actually talks about the benefits that come with using animal models versus computer models when it comes to research in modern medicine. And also, one, he makes the case that there's a lot of unnecessary abuse that occurs. And I'm sure you're aware of this as well. The perfume industry, for example, when we know like, hey, we want to make sure that this stuff is safe for testing, we do that by basically, like spraying stuff in like rabbits' eyes and stuff and seeing if like, they react to that, which is of course painful to the rabbit and stuff. So there's, there's benefits that come with.
But to play devil's advocate there, that is done so that if we find out the rabbit goes blind, we don't mass market that to humans to blind a bunch of humans. Yeah. And so I'd rather blind one rabbit than like 10,000 kids who sprayed perfume in their face.
Yeah. Well, let's say this, because you address a lot of things that I don't think I can cover in a single call with you here. I would say is what the simplest case I could make, right, is let's say that there is a category of this is absolutely what has to happen with animals in order for humans to flourish, right? Let's say that exists. And some vegans may agree with you there and say, hey, like, yeah, actually that exists. There has to be some animals that are done for this testing or this kind of thing, right? Does that category include my McDonald's cheeseburger? Right? I don't think so. And I don't think you would think so either, right? I think there's definitely going to be, right, instances where we don't actually need to use as much animals as we have to. One, if not for moral reasons, we can talk about climate reasons, we can talk about for all these other things, right? So like is everybody being vegan going to address every single issue or problem that comes with using animals? Is it going to, are we going to have instant solutions for every single thing? No. But how many solutions have we come up with now? Right? Because more people are adopting an ethic that involves the eschewing of animal products, right? It has to happen at some point. We have to make changes. I think you would agree with this too, right? That like, look, we're going to have to make global changes in our diet. How many people are talking about bugs being used as a protein source, right? It's going to happen. For me, that means making the changes in my life now to do that. I don't have the answers for every single, use case for animals, but I do know that there's a lot more solutions than when people give it granted for. And if I can at least eschew as much as I can, because I'm never going to be perfect about it, right? As if I drive my car, I might hit a fly or something, right? And there's a debate, of course, of how much bugs factor into this. But the point is, I think I'm going to be living more in line with my values if I try to be as consistent as I can with my principles, and that being eschewing as much animal products as as a means necessary for my own life. So there's my case there.
So AJ,
I definitely want to. I'm sorry, just very quick. I definitely want to just say I appreciate you saying that, because like it is a problem whenever somebody tries to propose a new system. Like anytime I talk about socialism or something, it's like, well, how are you going to fix every single possible thing?
Yeah,
like, I don't want to go, and I also don't want to try to get on this moral like grandstand that people do, this kind of sea lion-y thing where it's like, okay, well, you're still buying shoes, and shoes are made by child slave and all these things.
Sure.
Like, there's any moral thing is going to overshadow this moral thing.
Yeah.
I want to make sure that, like, you know, for the people watching, you and I agree on a lot about.
We agree on 95% of things.
Yes, it's just that extra bit. So yeah, I don't think there's anybody on these shows that disagrees on like the bulk of the argument that animals are treated poorly and should be utilized less. I think that for sure.
Yeah,
I think
I think
is that less.
And it's so disheartening to realize that whenever you're trying to work for some moral good, you uncover 2 or 3 more moral goods that you also have to face. Another challenge that you have to overcome in order to achieve the first thing, right? So I think that kind of speaks to the laundry list of things that Dan and Forrest kind of just outlaid. But AJ, I'd like to ask you, do you want to reflect on that, and then we're going to move on to some other calls.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think all of you hit it spot on. Absolutely. And the last few minutes where you were saying that, you know, we shouldn't expect 100% of the population to go 100% vegan. I think that the conversation is more about trying to get people to realize that we can actually use biology to inform the reduction of harm, not just of humans, but of non-human animals. And we know that the use of animals, you know, as Forrest mentioned earlier, the environmental impact is pretty big, and it definitely affects human well-being. But I'm really glad that you guys did this back and forth conversation, because that was exactly where I was going. Like the second part of my question was going to be about, you know, the biological implications of how we use animals, and how do we decide where to use animals, right? Because I often hear Forrest and Erica talk about the similarities between chimpanzees and, you know, like the brains and the DNAs and behaviors being so similar to humans. As Dan mentioned, you know, pigs being used for cardiac issues. My teenager has, you know, a valve replacement, and one of the options was a pig valve. We went with the mechanical for different reasons, but, you know, that was an option. And had I needed to make that decision, obviously, yeah. But I have.
Yeah, you're going to save your child, right? Yeah, and I think
morality. Yeah.
And I think Dan, you know, Dan alluded to those 2 points very well, right? So one, right, I don't think humans really understand, and this speaks to your question initially about the biology. You know, I don't think people really understand how similar humans are to other animals, right? Yeah. And then also this idea that we're not saying that sometimes, you know, an animal might have to be impacted for humans to survive, but that doesn't necessarily have to be the default of our everyday lives. And so there is a distinction that can be made there. For me, I think the case that Chase made to me was, here I am being this activist against human suffering, but I'm paying people to murder other animals and it's okay for me because they don't look like me. And I was like, wow, dude. And so that's why I took a step back to re-examine everything. But AJ, I want to thank you for invoking a really thought-provoking conversation between these 2 big brains to my right. Yeah, if you're looking at the TV, it's my right. But yeah, if I'm looking at it, they're on my left. Who knows? It's subjective. But AJ, did you have any last?
Enough to know right from left.
Did you have any parting shots before we move on?
Well, I mean, the last thing I will say is, like, you know, my problem with this is, like, we are kind of using the same argument that theists are using, that humans are superior creatures, and
yes,
you know, as atheists we shouldn't be using this kind of position. And yeah, that's my ending.
That's important. That's an important point. And that comes with the connection, I think, that Dan was making about hey, how similar are we all? Are we anyway? And I know that you've heard Forrest mention that if you've been watching him at all for the years that he's been doing this. Yeah, I mean, we are all just we're all animals, right?
And to be clear too, sorry to interrupt, but like, there's a misconception as well that the case is like, oh, well, if there's a fire and there's a dog and a human, are you going to save the dog over the human? No, I will save the human every day of the week, right? But like, that's not the point. The point is that we're similar enough to where the dog does have some consideration, then that I would make a consideration if possible, right? So yeah,
for sure.
Yeah.